Welcome to the Square Media Network. This is Unapologetically Black with LaWanna Mayfield. And today I have the amazing Mr. Jay Parker joining me. And we are learning together how to totally utilize social media in a much better way. So those of you that are tuning in, please share with your friends, create a watch party. We are doing the same ourselves over here. But Mr. Jay Parker, welcome to the program. And I am so appreciative of the conversation that we are having tonight, which is a conversation about wealth in the Black community. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first, thank you for having me. I really feel honored being here tonight. I'm Jay Parker. I'm from Maryland, and I've been in Charlotte for actually longer than I lived in Maryland. I've been doing real estate for somewhere around 26 years. And that's what I do. I haven't had a job since 1993.
1993.
1993.
Okay.
So this is what I do. And some people ask me when they see me, they say, "Hey, Luke, are you still doing real estate?" And I say, "Well, what else do I know how to do?" So that's my story. And I.
So how did you get into it back in 1993?
Well, prior to 93, I was working at a store called 84 Lumber, and the people that came in the store were actually landlords. And so one guy in particular, I asked him, I said, "Well, what do you do for money?" And he said, "I rent properties." I said, No. Well, what's your day job? What do you really do? And he said, "Yeah, that is it." And so I never until that time could conceive someone doing that for a living. I mean, I just grew up thinking that everybody had a 9 to 5 or, they had something that they did, and renting houses just never crossed my mind as being able or something that you could do and sustain a lifestyle or a living.
So when you think about that, and as we're going into this conversation, I want to bring into it Andre Perry, who is up on the screen for those that are watching. Mm-hmm. He's actually a fellow at the Brookings Institute. I had the opportunity to meet him last week when I was in San Antonio for a conference. And while at that conference, what we learned, volumes, because now we play it back for both of us. Mm-hmm. So this young man has been doing a study, and this study was titled, it was originally published as the devaluation of assets in Black neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And this was his Brookings Institution, November 27, 2018 report that he started on. And now he's written several books and he's out doing a number of speaking engagements. What he noticed for much of the 20th century, the devaluing of Black lives led to segregation and racist federal housing policy through redlining that shut out chances for Black people to purchase homes and build wealth, making it more difficult to start and invest in businesses and afford college tuition. Still, home ownership remains a beacon of hope for all people to gain access to the middle class through home ownership rates. Though home ownership rates vary considerably between whites and people of color, it's typically the largest asset among all people who hold it. You have been working in this field since 1993. Would you agree with this assessment?
I would agree to that, but I don't know if they really, at this point, discriminate in the same manner in which they do. Do they still discriminate? I think so, but I don't think it is as apparent. I think it's a way of actually discriminating against habits. They look and observe the different habits of people, and based on their habits, then they're able to justify the discrimination. For example, with appraisals, with an appraisal, you got to look for a recent sale within the last 6 months and maybe a year. So the farther out you go, far as time, then they start devaluing the value of that asset. For example, a lot of Black people, they struggle to just own a home.
Right.
And then the last thing they want to do is lose it. So they fight to keep it. And so once they get it paid off, then they just keep it. They don't sell. Whereas if the sales are not happening in the neighborhood as they are in other neighborhoods, then based on the habit, then they can discriminate legally.
And here's, I think, a opportunity where we can dig into that a little bit more. So when you think about the idea of purchasing that home and selling, a lot of people, especially that are not necessarily as savvy about the investments that can be made and the opportunities that can be made with home ownership, they don't think about a starter home. They don't think of that first home with necessarily the vision of a bigger home or moving to a different type of home, which helps to have those sales and be able to have some equity, build up some equity, sell, use the profits to purchase your next home. You're absolutely right. Within the Black community, overwhelmingly, and I think it's also within the working poor, working class community, that was such a major investment and such a big achievement to say I'm a homeowner.
Yes.
That you think it ends there. So one of the other things that was identified is, as you mentioned, the devaluation. So there's a devaluation measure. And what was noted by Mr. Perry is if we can detect how much racism depletes wealth from Black homeowners, we can begin to address bigotry principally by giving Black homeowners and policymakers a target price for redress. Laws have changed, but the value of assets, buildings, schools, leadership, and land itself are inextricably linked to the perceptions of Black people, and those negative perceptions persist. You shared some of the perception, and that is that, well, we create the negative without even realizing because we're holding on to it. So you don't have the sales. Can you think of other perceptions, especially someone that has been successful with the housing market and the housing arena, when you go into a neighborhood, negative perceptions that you see that still persist?
Well, I think a lot of things is the crime, the different things that happen in some of the communities that make it less than desirable for people to want to come there or even go there. And I think that, again, it scares a lot of people away, and a lot of things happen. And then it's thought, hey, you don't want to go over there because it's a bad area. You don't want to be caught there after dark because that's a bad area. And so after a while, those bad areas become the desirable areas. It's like a bait and switch type thing. And a lot of us really don't put ourselves in position to take advantage of those opportunities. I don't know if we really have I think we should do something about it as relate to participating in the process, opposed to looking at it from the perspective of this is what's happening and then not really having a game plan for doing something about it.
And I think there's also that misconception because crime is everywhere. It's just not reported in Ballantyne area or parts of Steel Creek and parts of Dilworth the way it's reported in Southwest Charlotte and West Charlotte and even East Charlotte. So there's always crime. There always has been crime. And we also don't take into consideration the role that federal policy, state policy, local policy has played in contributing to devaluing homes and neighborhoods by not investing infrastructure. And when that infrastructure investment comes in, you also see new money coming in, and that new money helps to shore up that displacement. But we have to take some ownership in that displacement when we're long-term renters versus owners.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is economics. And I think economics from the standpoint of if you're getting paycheck to pay, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, your vision becomes very narrow and very short. And so therefore you can't see long distance. You can't see into the future, if you will. You can't really, or not say you can't, you don't actually plan for the future. So you're trying to live from 1 week to the next.
And nowadays, paycheck to Monday.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we're talking about planning, a lot of people aren't participating or even aware of the planning that is anticipated for a specific area. And so if they knew, then they could plan for that. But because of their current situation, they are not conditioned to actually even plan, because their plan is, like you said, paycheck to Monday. And so they can't really foresee doing something 2 weeks in advance, opposed to 10 years, 15 or 20 years in advance. So they're not participating in the process. They're not a part of the process.
So as we talk about that, if you angle a little bit, because you are dropping serious knowledge here for those that are tuning in, I thank you again for tuning in. Here's the other piece that we have to think about. When we talk about them having access to information, all the information is available.
It is.
You know that old saying, if you don't want us to know about it, put it in a book?
Yes.
Well, now it's put it online.
Yeah.
Because you can go to the City of Charlotte's website. So if you're not familiar, it's www.charlottenc for North Carolina.gov for government. And you can look at the 2040 plan. You can go back and look at the 2020 plan. These plans are created by not only business leaders, but community leaders and those who are thought leaders to talk about what is your vision and your goal for the city of Charlotte. So what we're seeing today in 2019 within a 5-mile radius of Uptown,
Yes.
which is Tuckasegee, Freedom Drive, Wilkerson Boulevard,
Yes.
South End. What you're seeing is a direct reflection of the vision that was held 25 years ago, and those who planned for it. A number of us were not looking and keeping our ears open and our ears to the ground to hear about that plan in order to take advantage of it.
Exactly. You know, and you bring up a very good point. I remember when, I think probably in 2002 or something like that, and it was the 2010 that I gave to a lot of people and made them aware that this exists. And so a lot of things that were supposed to happen by 2010. Most of them happened prior to that. And things that, one of the things that was supposed to happen was the Major League Baseball field, but then, you know, you have a minor league.
Right.
And it's pretty much the same place where they had anticipated to be. Even the referendum that they had for the now Spectrum Arena that everyone voted down, and it wasn't supposed to be, but as we see today, it is there.
And it's a major economic boom to the city.
Absolutely. So a lot of things that insight that you can get by getting those books. And one I think that is now is looking to see where the light rail is going to be, or where they're proposing for it to be. Because I think wherever they're saying it's going to be, more than likely it's going to be. And so if you start looking at those areas and start purchasing in those areas, even if today they don't appear to be, desirable areas, they will become, as all the other areas in Charlotte has become very desirable.
So when we talk about the target, the target audience for this conversation is very diverse. I have run into people of multiple socioeconomic backgrounds, but when I want us to bring this down a little for that working class person that may be looking at how would I even start? So, okay, I just heard Mr. Parker say I need to look at the areas, even if I did know that Wilkerson Boulevard. You say everything 3 times for people to get it. Okay. That the light rail will be coming up Wilkerson Boulevard.
Yes.
How would I, as a working class resident, even begin to consider land ownership and or home ownership? Yeah,
well, one of the things that I posted today was called Thoughtonomics.
Thoughtonomics. Yes, sir.
And actually Thinkonomics. And so, it all begins with a thought. And if that's what you want to do, become a home ownership or participate in the real estate planning or investing, you have to plan. And so most people, they say 62% of the population, if they had a financial crisis that was $1,000 or more, it's nothing they could do about it. So what that's telling me is that most people aren't preparing. They're talking about home ownership or what they want to do, but they're not doing anything about it. They're not actually putting money away. They should be saving a minimum of 10% of every money that they get. Put it away. Start storing money. One of the things I suggest is that you need to get a minimum of 100% return on your money in the first year. Now,
explain, how do you get a minimum of 100% of return on your money?
Well, again, it's Thinkonomics, right? And so therefore, you can do it on purpose. One of the things we were walking this morning, and one of the guys had he had bought some. He had some land, 21 acres, and he had a cabin out there, and he had multiple cabins, and he rents those on Airbnb. Well, he has absolutely no costs in it. He has no cost. So we have to think about how can we turn something of no value into value where people will pay you. So he has these cabins that is on his family land, and he put them on Airbnb, and he's booked for a month and a half.
Okay, now that's a great example. Yet he had family land.
Okay. Well, let's take
And
another
he
step.
had cabins that were there on that
Yep.
family land.
Yep.
So we can't discount that.
Okay.
So for that person who they're in a home,
Yeah.
but they would like to have work towards financial
Okay.
independence and freedom.
Yes. Yes. So let's look at it from this perspective.
Okay.
A lot of people have a house that might be 3 bedrooms. Mm-hmm. So they have a spare bedroom. They have something now they call Airbnb.
Yep.
So they can rent that bedroom out. So now they just took that space and started creating cash or cash flow. So now they can take that to assist them in addition to the 10% that they're now going to save with that money. And that will help them to get to the point when opportunity presents itself. Now they have the money, they could do something about it, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense.
So a lot of, like for another situation, Kyle goes to the Salvation Army. Salvation Army has an auction every day, Monday through Friday. And so he gets stuff like, I think he got 2 grills or something like that, barbecue grills. And then he went to Craigslist. And Craigslist have a section that's called free stuff.
Right.
And so he goes to free stuff and he sees people that have grills that they're giving away or that they no longer want. And so he gets them. So he gets the grills, he paint them up, maybe get a $2 or $3 can of paint, and then he puts them on OfferUp and sell them for $50, $60. He's in it at $2 or $3, and he's making $50 to $60 on a grill. That's way more than 100% on his money.
Exactly.
So now he has a start to take that money that he has made and double that money and keep doubling it. And so when opportunity presents itself for a home or for a down payment or whatever the case might be, they have the money.
So keep in mind, people, he just gave you a real life example of how you can make money without spending a lot of money. The key to that is not to spend that $100 or a couple of $100 that comes in, because then you're falling into Parkinson's law.
Parkinson law of money, absolutely. And what is Parkinson law of money?
Great. Hit me back with that one. So the gist of which I would encourage everyone to take the time to go online and look up Parkinson's law of money, because ultimately it is that idea of the more you make, the more you spend.
Absolutely.
That old school saying that we used to have, keeping up with the Joneses.
Yes, absolutely.
Opposed to recognizing that as you're increasing your income, your goal should be how to increase that income.
Yes. Yes. And so with Parkinson law, we've all had situations where we come into a large sum of money and we swore that we were going to be really good stewards with our money.
We went and bought a leather coat. We went and bought some bling.
Yeah.
We went out and bought a new car. Went and got some rims for the car. Went and bought some hair. Went on a weekend trip. Went on a 2-week trip.
Yes.
Yes.
And so what happens is my Uncle Percy, who he passed when he was 97, but he said, if you want to be wealthy, he said, eat the fruit, not the seed.
Yes.
And so many people eat the seed. So if you eat the seed, you can't bear any fruit.
Right.
And so when you're getting that money, most people look at stuff and they buy stuff. And so they're not planting the seed. But if they were to plant the seed, it would bear fruit and they would continuously eat. But that's not most people have.
They are. And I'm going to, full transparency and ownership, I am commercialized as I don't know what. As much as I try to fight it, so I kind of get to the place where I do a lot of online shopping and put a lot in my basket, and then I just close the whole site down. and just leave it sitting there. Then they start hitting you with all the emails saying, did you forget something? Like, we'll give you free shipping. We'll give you an extra discount. Did you forget something? So it is that piece of changing your mindset.
Yes.
But that comes from a conversation. The other reason why I was so excited for you to join the show this evening is a lot of people are coming home. A lot of people are home for Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And we're coming to grandma's house, and we're coming to great aunt and great uncle's house. And we have to have some very real conversations.
Absolutely.
Because the reality is our elders are getting older.
They are.
And as a family, had you had a conversation about what happens to that home, to that property? Are the property taxes paid up? Are you going to have to argue with a cousin because grandma left the house between three of you? Two of you may have a business mindset and the third one doesn't.
Right.
So there was this deed that you told me about.
Yes.
A ladybird deed.
Yes.
What is a ladybird deed for those that are listening, and what is the purpose of a ladybird deed?
Well, it was basically designed. Well, let me back up a little bit.
Yes.
People born between 1946 and 1964 is the largest population of people born in the history of the United States. It's called the baby boom folks. And so with those people, they bought into the concept of home ownership. So most of those people, or a lot of those people, they bought homes. They have homes. Well, statistics says the people that are 65 years of age currently, 70% of them will either be in a assisted living or a nursing home before they
70%.
70%.
Okay.
So with that, a lot of the wealth, because that's going to be the largest transference of wealth ever in the history of the world or history of the United States. But it's not going to go to where we think or anticipate it to go. Big Mama said, hey, look, I want this house to go to my grandkids or
Right.
my kids or whomever. But now Big Mama never anticipated getting sick, going to the nursing home. Well, nobody has, or most people don't have long care insurance. And so now she has to get Medicaid. So Medicaid says, okay, we'll pick up your bill. You'll go into the nursing home and we'll just lien the house.
Wait a minute. Let's repeat that again, because you can have a will and you
Yes.
can say in that will who you want to leave it to.
Yes.
But if grandma goes in,
Yes.
Big Mama goes in and into assisted living.
Yes. Or
and
nursing home.
Or a nursing home. And she has to rely on Medicaid.
Medicaid, yes.
What can happen?
Well, Medicaid, because it's free, they're covering the bill. So Medicaid is not going to allow you to have assets over here and we pick up the bill.
Right.
So Medicaid said we'll lien that real estate, which means that we can't say how much we're going to lien it for because we don't know how long she's going to live. So if she lives along,
10 years.
Yeah, in a nursing home, so that bill could be astronomical. So now they want to recover some of their money. So they force a sale on Big Mama's house. And whatever proceeds come from Big Mama's house go to Medicaid.
And then that anything over and above that is what will be left
It's
in
not,
that will.
I promise you, it's not going to be anything left over. See, because now you have credit cards. You have anybody. See, once you start probating the estate, you have to list in the paper once a week for 4 weeks. Are there any creditors?
So any and every creditor
Yes.
will come out the woodwork because
Yes.
by law, the family has to list.
Absolutely. They have to list in the paper, or whoever's probating the estate, list in the paper. That's one of the procedures that they have to do, that this person is deceased, and are there any creditors out there?
Wow.
If so, come forth.
Okay.
So now all that has to happen before, and everyone's settled, paid, before now we look at the will.
Wow.
And a lot of people are not aware of that. They're thinking, hey, I'm left in the will, but there's a whole lot of other stuff that has to happen before that happens. There may not be anything left over after the will. So you have a piece of paper that really doesn't, may not
was
be
a great
effective.
thought.
Yes. may not have been effective.
So again, people, we got to have some real conversations.
Absolutely.
So once what you've learned
Yes.
over the years is that there is a way
There's
to
multiple
protect
ways.
Big Mama's house.
Yeah, absolutely. There are multiple ways. One of the ways that I just became aware of is something called a ladybird deed. And the ladybird deed actually allows the property to be conveyed over to this ladybird deed, and then they can leave it to the family or leave it over to the children or the grandchildren or whoever they desire to. Now, the unique thing about it, Medicaid actually helped to draw the content of this deed.
So Medicaid years ago actually helped.
Not that long ago.
Really?
Yeah, not that
So
long ago.
Medicaid actually helped to put the language in to
Yes.
protect
Yes.
the home asset.
Now, up to, I think it's $572,000.
I can work with $570,000.
So up to $572,000, the ladybird deed would protect that asset.
Which will make sense because if you are a millionaire and they didn't necessarily say you're a millionaire and that home,
Yeah.
that asset is valued over $1 million, but you're in essence poor, which is why you qualify for Medicaid, you do want to have the ability to have some of that wealth go to
Right.
your family.
Well, when you say millionaire is not the millionaires that we were that they were
No.
when we were kids. So millionaires today are people just the regular middle class, or millionaires is the new middle class.
Wow. That's sad when
But
you
that's
think
reality.
about it.
That's reality.
I've said numerous times over the years when you hear politicians talking
Yeah.
about they're doing everything for the middle class, and I'm like, what middle class? The middle class has all been almost eliminated.
Yes.
What do we do? We have wealthy and poor. That's
Yeah.
I don't know what this middle class is, but you say there's more than one way to help
Yes.
protect it. And you mentioned an insurance that people don't think about.
It's a trust.
Okay.
See, now, a trust, you have to do that. That's planning. You have to come into planning. See, where you have what is called look-back periods.
Look back periods.
So let's say, for example, if someone goes into an assisted living, if they go into an assisted living, the look-back period is 3 years, meaning a conveyance or a transfer of deed, if it cannot happen within 36 months. It has to be after 36 months before that deed is considered valid. If it's a nursing home, the look back period is 5 years. So if a conveyance or a transfer happened within 5 years, it's considered a fraudulent conveyance or unauthorized conveyance.
And you're seeing that a lot across the nation,
Yes.
where you're seeing individuals that are going into senior living facilities and that are losing their properties by unscrupulous people coming
Yes.
in and knowing what the local laws are.
Yeah.
That goes back to that piece of knowing what are your state laws and what are your local laws to protect you and your family.
Yeah, well, I think more people and more organizations should educate folks on the different strategies needed to preserve wealth. Because if not, a lot of wealth is going to be displaced. It's not going to go where it's anticipated. So a trust, for example, is a very simple document, but it avoids probate. So if you do it outside of the parameters, the 3 years or the 5 years, it will sideswipe or sidestep probate and go directly to whoever it's intended to.
Wow.
So after it sidesteps the probate, then the will dictates who it goes to.
Okay, so this is a conversation that you will have with your attorney. And hopefully people are taking notes on this. And if not, you can rewatch this at a later date because there's a lot of good information that you should be writing down, because you also have to pay attention to the fact that every attorney isn't going to share this information with you.
Right.
You have to go in with a certain level of knowledge
Exactly.
and know how to ask the right questions and to make sure. And it may not be a intention for them not to share it. They have a lot of information in their mind. They're working on based on what you say that you need. So
Right.
I'm asking you, what are your needs? You're telling me, if you don't tell me all your needs, then I don't know how to best represent you or
Right.
to refer you.
Right. And the thing is, you have to have an idea of what it is that you want to do. And then it's the job of the attorney to put it in legal terms
Okay.
or legal documentations to make happen what you want to make happen. Or they'll tell you the limitations of what it is that they can do legally. So it's important to have an understanding. But a lot of times people don't have an understanding of what they want to do because they have limited, like you were saying, conversation.
Yes.
So I would suggest, different congregations, churches, and places like that start having the congregate or start having the conversation, and then you could hear something that someone has stated that you otherwise would not have thought of, but you very much need that information because it's something that really, with a different paradigm, we're all going to have different concepts or different ideas or different, but we all need that same information, but didn't know it because that person wasn't present or because that person was
because when
present.
you think about the opportunities, again, hopefully this will trigger conversations over the next day to 3 days over the weekend to start talking about having real conversations about protecting the wealth.
Yeah.
But that was a very good suggestion and recommendation that we can take this into the churches.
Yes.
We can take it into the community.
Absolutely.
We want to get this information out to as many people as possible for you at least to have the ability to make a informed and educated decision.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned two things. You mentioned the Lady Bird deed as well as a trust.
Right.
What else would you want people to know?
Well, you can do it with just a regular conveyance, or a regular transfer. So if you want to give it to one, you have multiple siblings,
Right.
and you give it to one of the siblings, the one that might be most responsible, or the one that's willing to take this. That's more
The responsibility on.
to handle it.
So have serious conversations. Don't give it to the bad one. And I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm saying that as when you're gone, parents, grandparents, think about the responsibility that you're leaving to your children and to your grandchildren. And I can tell you from experience, because unfortunately my father passed away when I was 13, my mom when I was 15. The worst thing that happened was the fact that my mother left a lot of money to me, the youngest, and I had siblings. Because she had children before her and my father got together. He had children. There was never any conversation around
Right.
the dinner table. There was never conversation around the television. There was never conversation with my adult siblings, because there wouldn't have been conversations with me. I was 13,
Right.
and they wanted me to be a child as long as possible. But my adult siblings, there were never conversations around the what if and what happens. When you are grieving, money is not going to stop that grief. You have very little value for money. You have very little value for property. All you're consumed by at that point is pain and hurt and heartbreak. So if you don't have a very clear understanding and start having these conversations, as difficult as they are, because in the black community, we don't love to talk about death. Like, everybody going to live to be 150. We don't ever want to talk about it. But we know the two things, if you live in the United States of America,
Right.
unless you're a billionaire, is death and taxes, because they don't figure out how to get away from taxes, and I think they're working on trying to figure out how to get away from death. But for the rest of us, those two things are a definite.
Yes.
So we got to have these real conversations about how do we protect ourselves and how do we change that mindset, because you have said more than once that we have to educate.
Yes.
And when we educate and when we think differently, that's when we can make the changes, opposed to just complaining about what we see going on around us.
And see, one of the things you say in education, I think a lot of people are trained but not educated.
Yes.
And so therefore they get caught up with the training and fail to educate themselves. And so with educating themselves, it comes with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And so understanding the situation better, then they can take an informed decision and make definite change.
Okay, so with thinking about those particular recommendations, specifically for our elders in the community. You also have people who receive a home. They may already have a home. What are suggestions that you would have? Because we have, or they're in a financial position where life has happened and they can't maintain the home anymore. What would you consider sharing with those individuals?
Well, I think that, we have to activate our thinking. And I think maybe shared living or, say, for example, you have a older family member, then maybe a younger family member that's responsible might come in and live with them, more so for companionship. But at all costs, they must maintain the asset.
Right.
Selling the asset is like eating the seed.
Right.
And so if you eat the seed, then there's no fruit. The tree is not going to bear any fruit. So
because you see people flipping houses
Absolutely.
all day,
yes,
every day. Every time you turn on the TV, you see a ad or a commercial. Every time you turn on the radio, you drive down the street, you see all these signs: "We buy your house, we
Yes.
buy houses, we buy ugly houses."
Yes.
The majority of the time, they're eating the seed.
Most people are eating the seed. Most people are eating the seed. So what I mean by that, it's sexy to say I made $100,000. It's sexy to say, hey, I did 100 houses this year or last year or whatever. But the key thing is it bearing fruit?
Right.
In most situation, it's not bearing fruit. And so then it's just like having a large sum of money, and then the Parkinson law money comes into play. And then when that happened, you're starting all over again. But if you had planted the seed, or if you had utilized that asset so that it remains in the family, whether it's the house that everyone can go to when they come to town, if you've left town, or if it's now an Airbnb or whatever, it's generating capital, but it's not loss. You did not start all over again. And so when utilizing those types of strategies, then I think you would prosper and you would continue to have a fruitful life.
So you touched on the opportunity of utilizing the house as a family house. So where I'm going to jump in is I'm going to share with those of you that are tuning in, you can charge family. Because what you don't want to do is put yourself in a position where a family member needs some help. You let them move in and they never leave.
Yes.
And they're not paying rent.
Yes.
Because the house is paid for it. So they're not paying rent. They're not keeping the house maintained. They're not keeping up with everyday wear and tear, but they're causing wear and tear on the house. That's a different conversation. You're not being fruitful with that mindset.
Right. And in many cases, you're not helping that person. You're actually aiding and abetting, because that person is probably not productive, and they probably need to be taken out of that environment and put in an environment where it's going to force them to be productive. And so that house, it's constantly going down because it needs repair. You know, it's like anything else. It needs maintenance. It needs to be maintained. And if not, the value is going to, start going down. And then before long, because most people are not good stewards with their money. So therefore, when they need money, if they have it, they don't want to give it for that, because I only own a fraction of it. I don't own 100% of it. But
even though you're utilizing it every day. So like we were talking day before yesterday about the example of someone who was living in a home, but unfortunately life happened. Drugs, alcohol came into play, but they were living it, so they moved into the backyard because they didn't have the access or possibly lights and other things. But even at that, you let somebody come in and talk you into selling at a very low price. And we're seeing that happen all over Charlotte right now, especially with elders, where people are coming in and fast talking them, and they may have paid $30,000 for that home 35 years ago. Well, because of the location of what we said earlier, new development, infrastructure, the plan, they don't realize that the land they're sitting on is now probably worth $300,000 or more.
Well, it's almost like if you're working in an office building and you've been in that office building 8 hours, and then after your shift is over, you go outside and you say, boy, it's cold out here. You had no idea because it was in a controlled environment. So a lot of people are not keeping up with what the values are. They know they paid $35,000. Now here comes someone offering them $100,000. This is probably more money than they've seen or made in 1 year ever. And so now it's like, it seems like a lot of money. But the problem you have is, what will $100,000 do in the city of Charlotte as far as buying a house?
Today. Exactly.
And it won't do much. It really won't. You can't buy a house. Well, I can say you can't, but it's very difficult to buy a house in Charlotte for $100,000.
And the other challenge is our elders don't like to tell you what's going on.
Yes.
Because of pride.
Yes.
Because I have had numerous conversations where I've tried to share with people. I try to change the conversation. I try to change the conversation up, because at first I was saying, don't sell your home.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got to the point where I started sharing, okay, if you're I can't tell you not to sell, even though I'm telling you not to sell. If you choose to sell and you know that you want to stay in Charlotte, go find that next home first. At least do that.
Yes.
So that you can see, what is it going to take?
Mm-hmm.
And would it actually make more sense for you to do a refinance, do a cash out, and do some repairs on your current home and still have equity in that home, versus selling your home and end up living in an apartment or living couch to couch?
Well, that's a great point, and I think that's a great, idea. One of the things that you might do, and this might be another strategy for maintaining the asset, if there are heirs that are capable of fixing the house up or making the repairs to the property, then they can make the repairs to the property and then put a lien against the property.
Okay, break that down.
All right.
What does that look like?
So let's say, for example, Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby has a house, or Bobby has financial means, maybe the ability to borrow money, or he's been a good steward with his money. He has money, and so he wants to fix up grandmother's house. And so Bobby goes and, everybody's in agreement. So Bobby goes and fix up grandmother's house, right? And so grandmother's house is being fixed up, modernized, and everything is documented. Everything is legal. And so now Bobby has a lien against grandmother's house.
How was Bobby able to create this lien?
By the dollar value. No different than some company coming and putting windows in your house. Mm-hmm. And then they place a lien for the cost of the repairs done to the property. So now Bobby has that same cost associated with fixing up the house, because it was his money. Mm-hmm. And so now it's a legitimate lien against that property. So now what happens is, grandma health might fail.
Right.
If her health fails, and then she's no longer, you could have stipulations very much like that of a reverse mortgage. In a reverse mortgage, it says that if the person that took out the loan, grandma, if she no longer can live in the house and she has to go out to a nursing home or what have you, then they can call the loan due. So Bobby could have the same verbiage as a reverse mortgage. So if she's no longer able to live in the property any longer, then Bobby can call the loan due. And what that means is Bobby can foreclose on the property.
Would it not just be a transference from grandma to Bobby?
If grandma has to go into the nursing home now, right? If she transfer it to Bobby, then we have the five-year look back.
Oh, okay.
So now if Bobby foreclose, then Bobby foreclose and become the owner of the property as a result of a foreclosure.
But then grandma that's going to be a hard conversation to have in our community, because all the other cousins that's going to come around about the fact that you foreclosed on grandma's property, not understanding that there was a bigger plan with keeping the property in the family.
Yes.
And what if Bobby is that shady cousin that's in the family?
Well, but then...
Because we have those.
That should have been established in the beginning.
Okay.
So, I'm not saying don't do your due diligence. I'm saying during your due diligence, and Bobby was the selected one.
And that's why I'm asking these questions so that the people understand. This just isn't a given where you just pick a family member. There's a lot of thought. And
Yes.
like you said,
It's planning.
thinking and planning that goes
Yes.
into this. It's not just something that you do. You need to take the time to make sure that you know what is the best step for you and your family.
It's so many different things that could, I'm just saying these are just possibilities, right?
Right.
What if there's a younger or his grandma, but maybe a cousin that's of age that is worthy, right? Or that is responsible.
Right.
You've heard of cousins getting married before.
Never thought about that. Again, when we're talking about the Black community.
So if the cousin's married, then it goes to the surviving cousin if something happens, and then the property can't be liened.
I think you saw that a lot more probably in the 60s
Perhaps.
is where you saw it a lot more and for protection. And you saw it really with the older cousins to protect the assets. See, you're giving us a lot to think about.
Well, I think it's just, you have to think, and we have to cultivate thought. And that's what most people don't do. And so with thinking, you could come up with different ideas, and then you could put it before the attorney to make it legal.
And also thinking about that conversation going back to the beginning of this discussion regarding majority minority community and what we look at. So I pulled up, and what's behind us on the screen now was an additional part of the Brookings Institute study in analyzing the devaluation of Black home ownership. The report found that according to their analysis, differences in home and neighborhood quality do not fully explain the devaluation of homes in Black neighborhoods. Homes of similar quality in neighborhoods with similar amenities are worth 23% less, around $48,000 per home on average, amounting to $156 billion in cumulative losses in majority Black neighborhoods compared to those with very few or no Black residents. To me, that goes back to the blockbusting and redlining of when we move into community. As I mentioned earlier, I was in San Antonio at a conference last week, and there was the panel that Andre was on. There was a mayor, African-American female mayor from a city. She had the exact home that was built on the other side of town.
Yes.
Built in her neighborhood. Her neighborhood was predominantly African-American, where her and her husband chose to move. The exact same home was valued, I believe, around $150,000 to $200,000 less.
Their property was
valued. The exact same blueprint, the same home that they saw on the other side, they had built. When you look at the multiple parts, as you mentioned earlier, the fact that we don't necessarily sell as often as other members of the community sell.
Right.
The devaluing by disinvestment by government and lack of infrastructure. And by the time we catch up, because of the new development that's happening, that's some years down the line. And during those years, because of property reevaluations, that new tax bill creates challenges for people.
It's just like the tax bill. You were sharing with me that there was different funds out there that some of the seniors could have access to that they just don't know. And so as a result, they lose the property as, for taxes. But there's still some things that happen that is, I don't know if it's exactly legal, but it definitely is unethical as to how, there's not a set standard of how the taxes are foreclosed on in Mecklenburg County.
Right.
And so it's I think it needs to be, I don't know if the councilmen even are aware of that.
I don't think so, because until you and I started talking, I have learned so much in a short period of time, a matter of weeks, from the conversations that you and I have had regarding the other side of property ownership, the impact, the fact that, let's say you are that individual and you're starting out and you own 3 properties.
Yes.
And you have your home that you live in, and then you've purchased 2 properties. I didn't understand the impact of how individuals who have their personal best interests at the forefront and their financial interests can use code enforcement basically as their own henchmen.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know a lot of people that have an interest in a property. And so the one that we were talking about with the guy living in the backyard, the investor that have interest in it, it is understood that he's calling code enforcement to cite the house. So that would increase his chances or opportunities of getting the property. And so I think that's wrong. Or like when I remember back in, I think, early mid-90s, when the Belmont community.
Yes.
And one particular councilman came to a meeting and said that it was 70+% rental in this neighborhood.
So for full transparency, so this is that show where we name names and call people, because I thought it was interesting because I did the research on it as well. And that was a much younger Malcolm Graham,
Yes.
who has now come back to council,
Right.
who went to the Belmont community, which was predominantly black
Right.
and working class.
Right. And so he went to the landlord meeting, and I was there, and he started talking about, the percentages and some of the things that they were going to do, or the plans that they have for the Belmont community.
And
Of
they
course,
be in the city of Charlotte.
Right. And so, and one of the ways that they attack the neighborhood is they come in with massive code enforcement. They start going property to property to property and citing it for code enforcement. Well, if you have 3, 4, 5 houses in there, then, I mean, you're being unfairly attacked, and you may not have the resources to keep up. And then they start with civil penalties if you're not working on the property, or in the 30-day period of time that they give you. Then they start the $100 a day or first day and $10 thereafter. And
Okay, now, but let's pause there for a minute, because some people will say, if you own 5 properties, why aren't you taking care of it? Because the other side of that is the city of Charlotte for a long time has seen slumlords who have let neighborhoods completely be devalued by not having good tenants in and not taking care of the properties. So how do you reconcile that part of the equation?
Well, I think it's we have to really come together and work together, because like right now we have a problem with homelessness, right?
Yes.
And so with that being an issue, the city of Charlotte is trying to end homelessness. And so they're actually approaching people, say, hey, listen, would you take in this homeless person? Well, in my opinion, that person may not be ready for home ownership, or may not be ready for
Exactly.
rental. So now you're asking me to take in this person to help the city to eliminate a problem with homelessness. Okay, but you haven't addressed that person's needs.
Exactly.
And so this person has other needs. And so now when they become a problem or what have you, now it's my problem. So now I'm the bad guy, but I'm trying to partner with you to solve a problem. And so I think we need to have a real good sit down and really try to fix the situation and not put a Band-Aid on it. I used to deal with high-functioning mentally ill men, and I had, I think, 3 guys in the house at one time. And so they had been on the program with Area Mental Health for years, so they weren't new to the program. And so they went like weekly or every other week to get their disbursement, because the county was their payee.
Okay.
So they governed their money. So they didn't give it all to them at one time. And then when they came back, they would get their medications. So that was a way to actually make sure that they were getting their medication. Well, we used to have meetings in the house every Tuesday. And so one guy in particular, he was actually relying on somebody else reading for him. So I wasn't really sure whether he couldn't read or he couldn't see. It was one of the two.
Okay.
But it was never established what it was. So I asked this caseworker, because they had him going to AA meetings and different meetings. And so my question is, how
How is that benefiting?
effective would that be if he can't read or see?
Right.
So, but this guy has been, they've been dealing with him. He's been a caseworker of this lady's for years. How can he be a part of your caseload and you not recognize that he can't see or read? One of the two. So again, a lot of things are not really, a lot of the needs aren't being met.
Wow.
And it's because a lot of people look at it as a job. I don't get
and
paid
I'm checking
for all
a box.
that. Exactly.
I'm checking a box.
And so that creates some of the problems. So when you look at a lot of the property providers and you say, hey, well, look, you're not putting this person out, you're allowing this to happen. Well, I mean, we're trying to partner with the city or partner with different programs to fix a problem. But then when the problem arises while it's in my possession, don't call me the bad guy. Don't call.
And that's very valid, which is why I wanted us to have that discussion, because it is that piece. Because then you have people out in the community that want to protest and march and say, and I'm like, I need us to understand that it's two separate conversations. A slumlord is a slumlord, and that needs to be dealt with accordingly.
Yes.
But when you have an individual who is attempting to offer housing that is quality housing
Yes.
at rents that varying people can afford. You know, my favorite thing is I'm not a fan of affordable housing language because the city's affordable. Just a question who's affordable for.
Yeah.
I have termed diverse price point housing because that's what we want. We want diverse pricing and diverse price points. So when you have that, and then if you keep getting hit with fines, that individual that's staying with you can't cover those fines. And if some of the fines are invalid, and or you have someone who's looking at your property because they want to own that property and they're just calling code enforcement because you can do it anonymously, there's a different conversation that needs to be had in order to create some stronger criteria so that we can try to help eliminate individuals that's figured out how to work the system and turn that public servant into a henchman.
Well, you know, you have the city that I'm not really sure. You know, I think they want the city to grow, which it is. They want the city to be appealing, which is becoming very appealing. You have property providers out there that are providing a good product. And so as things become more expensive, well, to adjust for that, you have to maintain a certain margin. And so that means that your rents have to go up to meet or match the margin that you need to make in order to be successful.
Okay.
And so some of the practices that the city is now doing makes it counterproductive. For example, you go to small claims court for eviction, summary ejectment.
Okay.
And so now the tenants,
a summary ejectment is an eviction. So that is someone who has been in a home and has not paid any rent for up to how long?
It could be they haven't paid for the current month, or it could be multiple months.
Okay.
You know, for whatever reason. And so now they're being provided with legal aid.
Yes.
So it's making it much, much more difficult for a property provider to put them out. But and
those that know how to work the system can sit in a home sometimes upwards of 6 months with no rent, causing damage to the home, and there is little protection for you, the homeowner.
And then you're asking me to deal with a tenant that you know may be affordable housing. And it's kind of a catch-22. You want to help, but at the same time, you're in the business to make money. And I'm not saying that you're not providing a good product, but the city doesn't seem to be working with us. They're saying that, hey, look, we need to end homelessness. But at the same time, when this person that you're giving us is not capable of handling a home and or a job, and so now we have to evict them, and now you're making it much, much more difficult for us to get out there, get them out of the house. What do we do? How do we handle that? What should we do?
And then you get to the place where, unfortunately, that you don't want to rent to people under a certain income. And then that starts the whole cycle all over again, because then we're looking at you as the bad guy for, well, how many homes do you need to own and how much money do you need to make? Why can't you rent the home at this much lower rate?
Yeah. And see, the city itself, right? The city, when you get a contract with the city, whatever service or whatever it is or job that you're performing for the city, you have to bid on it.
Yeah.
And so in the bidding procurement process, you have to bid down the price. So you're asking me to go on a very shoestring budget to try to make everything work, but the city is based on profit or a larger margin. And so it's a counterproductive. They want to make all the money, but want us to really provide a good product on a zero budget.
Right. Provide not even a good, excellent product.
Excellent.
And that's
Excellent.
one of the challenges that I've had for the many years that I've been in political office is on the state level, because a lot of people also don't realize the city is governed by the state. We're a dealing rule state. So whatever language or policy legislation the North Carolina General Assembly creates, that is the lay of the land for all the municipalities across North Carolina. The North Carolina General Assembly has a lowest bidder. The lowest bidder is always not the best bidder.
Right.
Because you turn around, you say the lowest bidder, so you come in and have to do this on a shoestring budget, but we want high quality work from you. So we put contingencies in place. So you just keep keep submitting an amendment request till you back up to the price that it really cost in the first place.
Exactly.
So it's this round robin game that you play in government. But I do agree with you. We make it difficult, as well as our partners make it difficult. And it's in large part because with our partners, the partners being those in diverse price point housing market, like a housing authority or housing partnership, they're then legislated by the federal government and the state. So things that would be a non-issue in your home that you live in, you can be fined for or receive negative marks in a scoring for, in order for someone to live there when you're trying to provide access and provide a need. So it is this continuous hamster wheel that's going on where we're not talking to each other and the right people aren't talking to each other is what the impact. Now, you gave an example of, we started out talking about Belmont. The biggest piece of that is when an elected official went in to paint this picture of revitalization.
Right.
Here's all the great things that's coming into the area that we want to do.
Right.
But not having the conversation that the majority of you that live here aren't going to benefit from this.
That's right.
You're not the target audience.
Right. Well, that's not the conversation. And so it's just like when Earl Village used to be downtown and, less than 2% of the people actually moved back in. And so everybody was all for it because they thought, hey, I'm going to be in that number. That was sadly not the truth.
And no one protected them to be in that number. So when we think back to 1967, I had shared a post on Twitter the other day from just an excerpt from the book Black Power, the original version, because we've had 2 or 3 iterations since then. But to paraphrase the excerpt from the book is the piece where when you have black elected officials that get into office and then they become the face that go out into the community and sell the community on the impacts of all these slides and everything that we've talked about without really educating the community to think about, okay, if this comes, this is what can happen.
Right.
So over the years that I've been in office, there have been several neighborhood association meetings where I'm in there and I hear people say, well, we want Harris Teeter. We want Publix. We want this infrastructure investment. We want a Dean and DeLuca. I was like, okay, so I can fight for you to get that. But I need you to understand, you probably won't be the one that's going to benefit from it. Because we're going to have a real conversation. Because for a Publix or a Harris Teeter to come over here on this side of town, they want the rooftops over here to have X number of expendable income. Now, it's a false narrative because Black people overwhelmingly are the largest consumers, whether we're working poor, working class.
Right.
So we're shopping in your shops anyway. We're just driving or catching a bus or taking a cab or whatever to get to it.
Right.
But that's idea is, in order for us to make this type of investment, we need incomes of 300,000 or more for each rooftop. That means a lot of you are going to be bought out, and those of you that have been long-term renters, the owner of that property is going to be given a number, and that number is going to be a number where he's just going to sell the property, and you may not even receive notice.
Well, that's happening now, right?
Yes.
And you see, I was reading something. It said that the average person to afford a 2-bedroom unit in Charlotte has to make about $46,000 a year.
Yes.
And so that's not the real world. And when you look at the rates of rents, I think rental rates or tax value or appreciation has, in the last 4 years, have grown by 53%. Well, with that, the cost of everything starts to go up. And so most people don't make enough money to afford housing.
No.
So they're traveling to other counties like Gaston County, Cabarrus County.
Right.
And so
Indian Trail.
those counties are now catching up. And so now they're got a mad exodus to these counties. And so they're like, man, I can get, a lot more now. And the people that are currently there are starting to feel the same pinch that the people that were in Charlotte are feeling. And so they're going farther and farther out. It's almost like an Atlanta type thing. Before long, people in Lexington, outside of Salisbury, are going to say they live in Charlotte because, we constantly keep moving farther and farther out. And it's one of those things where if we're not careful, if you sell a house, you likely won't be able to buy a house in Charlotte.
Exactly. And when you look at that, that is why tonight's conversation is so important. One of the other things that I wanted to note is still looking at what that devaluation measure, what it does is we focus on the owner-occupied homes, of which we've had a lot of conversation about it, but there's two reasons. First, home appreciation results in higher home values, and this brings wealth to owners. There's a large and well-known wealth gap between blacks and other racial groups in the United States, much of which can be attributed to differences in home ownership rates and the value of housing. Second, the devaluation of rental properties is advantageous to renters, insofar as it results in a lower rental payment for similar quality housing. The devaluation of owner-occupied housing makes it easier to acquire the home, but once purchased, it is unambiguously disadvantageous. Okay, that's two big words back to back. Say that quickly. To the owner and the occupier, who would otherwise benefit from being able to refinance, borrow, or sell at a higher valuation.
Yeah. And so, if a lot of the people, when they're buying the house, it's like, or when they're selling the house,
right?
And it's in, it's been lived in. So it's been lived in for a long period of time. And so a lot of the updates today that they're looking for in housing isn't in the houses that they're living in.
They're a lot smaller.
And they're a lot smaller. But the problem is, it's like being in the building again. You haven't been in the market looking at granite countertops or knowing what the cost of a roof is or having windows replaced or that type of thing. And so someone asks you, say, hey, well, listen, what do you think it's going to take or what kind of cost do you think it's going to be to actually upfit this house to today's cost? And so you have no idea. So you pull some numbers out of the air and usually they're a lot higher than the numbers that builder or that investor can get it for, because they're getting stuff at a discount because they're buying in volume, or they're doing, they might do 10, 15, 20 houses a year. And so they're using the same contractor that's going to give them a better price than they would give me if I'm only doing one every 10 years.
Okay.
And so you don't have an idea. So you're overshadowing the value. So you might say, oh, well, it might cost $80,000 to put a house in that. And they might be able to get it for $20,000, $30,000. And so you don't know that. So you just bid it against yourself in a sense by increase or saying that it's, the repairs are going to cost a lot more than you know that they would cost.
But the other challenge of that is if it is owner occupied, and again, you go to attempt a refi, that refi, because of the lack of sales in your area or because of the low sale prices that are happening in your area, your refi cash out may not be enough to cover because supply and demand. So much construction is happening in the city that you're on a 6-month or more wait list to get any work done because so much new construction, the cost of materials have gone up, the cost of manpower have gone up. So it may have been a $35,000 remodel addition 7 years ago. Today, that same cost may be that $80,000.
Yes.
But your refi comes in because of lack of sales or low sales, may come in at $140,000. Well, your mortgage lender is only going to give you 50 to up to 80% of the total cost. So you get 32 to maybe 40,000. That's not enough to do what it is you're trying to do. So then you make a decision of, okay, do I pay off debt, pay off credit card debt, or pay off a vehicle, or pay off, or get some minor repairs, do the mold and the crawl space, do something with the attic, maybe put a new kitchen in, or maybe remodel a bathroom.
Right.
So it's like all these little pieces that are tied together where you can't keep up with the market, because if your home is under 1,000 square feet, everything coming out the ground today is 1,500 square feet or larger.
Right. Yeah, that's typically how it works. And, based on, like you gave in a situation earlier about this one, the lady had a house, then there was another house identical.
Yes.
And it was $200,000 less. Well, that's based on the habit. That's based on the habits of people. So they don't have to say just because it's a black neighborhood, they can go in there and do it and say, hey, well, listen, there's no sales. We can't find any sales within a mile radius. And so then they look at a like kind. So even though you can find, I'll give you a prime example. In Belmont, in the Belmont community, they were literally, when they first started the whole gentrification thing in Belmont, they were literally going over in the Plaza Midwood, which is only a street over for the farthest point. It's street over, but it wasn't a like community. But if I'm in California, I don't know that. I don't know that this is a different community. I'm just looking at it and say, oh, it's a street over. Here's some comps here. But it's a totally, completely different neighborhood.
Yes.
And so that's what happened. That's how that gentrification happened, because they were going in a community that wasn't alike. And now look at it. It's an alike.
Wow.
It's,
And they made it.
They made it
alike.
made it work. Yeah.
So, and this ties directly into this comment. The devaluation is defined as the percent discount in median home values between neighborhoods with 50% black population and neighborhoods with no black residents. After accounting for structural characteristics of homes and neighborhood amenities, in our preferred estimate, it is calculated by observing the relationship between median neighborhood home prices per square foot from Zillow and black population shares across the full range of neighborhoods within the individual metropolitan areas that have at least one majority black neighborhood and at least one neighborhood with less than 1% black population share. So we go back to thinking of Belmont and Plaza Millwood during that time. In most, though not all, metropolitan areas with at least one neighborhood of each type, the percent difference is negative. Structural characteristics of homes and neighborhood amenities do not fully explain the absolute difference in home value.
Yeah.
And what you just said was a perfect example, because if you're a company outside of the area, then what you're looking at is not comparable based on the individual neighborhoods that are being impacted.
Right. So one of the things, what do we do with this?
Yes.
What kind of plan can we come up with, a plan that will address this? And I think that's one of the things that we need to do from a Thinkonomics perspective, is to get together and come about with ideas for overcoming this, because this is something that's happening across the country. This is not just in Charlotte. This is everywhere, right? So one of the things I think that we can do, and this is not the answer, but it is maybe a answer. And if you have Big Mama's house, and one of Big Mama's children or what have you want to buy the house, they should buy it from Big Mama. And so if that happens enough, right, an actual transaction where they're buying the house from Big Mama. So now that child or that group of children now own the house. Big Mama now has the money. She has the money. And so
and Big Mama stays in the house.
She can stay in the house.
I want Big Mama to still have housing.
Right.
If she chooses to. Big Mama can stay in. So, because in essence, there's a good possibility. Big Mama paid about $35,000, $40,000 for the house. If you buy the house for $50,000, that way you're building up the equity in it. You're keeping it in the family, but you're contributing to those sales that we're talking about.
Yeah, but we're talking about a plan, though.
Okay.
This is not something that we're doing it for the purpose of getting some money so we can go out and buy the latest and greatest new car.
Right.
It's actually a plan that the property is bought from Big Mama, or the property is bought from your parents.
Right.
And so now your parents could help whatever with the purchasing of other property.
Right.
But then what happens is then it's a situation where you become economically empowered. But you have to have a plan. But we don't really buy it from them. They gift it to us. And so now you have the property, you still don't have any money. And so with the buying it, it gives seed money. So now you have seed money that you perhaps you can go buy other houses in the neighborhood, or you can buy other houses that creates more seed. And so we have to come up with a approach that's a realistic approach that can help survive or save the community, opposed to just gifting it. Gifting it is not going to help the situation any. You got to get some money from it.
This has been an amazing conversation, and I hope all of those that have tuned in have learned a lot. I am going to say, I mentioned earlier, this is a opportunity where twice a month you can tune in to Unapologetically Black with me, LaWanda Mayfield. In 2020, because of everything that I have learned and what I'm looking at in community, I have spoken with our producer, owner, Mr. Rutherford of Square Media Network, and I am going to be dedicating one of my shows specifically around this topic, around wealth, around how we create wealth, how we maintain wealth, how do we grow wealth in our communities. With looking at that, I wanted to make sure that everyone knows that, again, using Brookings Institute, if you go to brookings.edu, you can look at, here's all multiple cities and states across the nation. So if I click on Charlotte, Concord, Gastonia. Now, these are numbers from going back to 2016. But if we look at these numbers and we talk about what, just expounding on tonight's discussion, the summary metrics show that the median home value, that's where I'm at, in majority black neighborhoods is around $162,546. Again, for everyone, the median, looking at home sales, taking that total number of about 3 homes, dividing that by 3. So our median is around 162 between Charlotte, Concord, and Gastonia. The estimated median home value in majority black neighborhoods in absence of de-evaluation is $185,613. The average devaluation of homes in majority black neighborhoods is negative 13.3%. Black share of metro area population is 22.2%. When we look at the keys, the share of the neighborhood population, breaking it down of less than 1%, 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10% to 20%, 30 to 50, 50% plus total population, looking at the median prices, breaking all this down. Again, you can go to Brookings, BROOKINGS.edu for education. We have multiple ways that we can grow. One is also around evaluators who are doing the property evaluations, whether you're purchasing that home, whether you're looking to refinance a home, whether you're looking to purchase an additional home as an asset. You have to have a property evaluation.
Right.
Historically, those that are in the field of evaluations are 90+% white. One of the recommendations with thinking of the conversations you and I have been having and the studies that I have been doing over the years and what I see, I made a recommendation to the city manager for the city of Charlotte, Mr. Marcus Jones, and to the council members on Monday of creating a grant to not only help cover the training costs to become a property evaluator, but to help create small business, because being a one-off evaluator isn't going to do it. When you identify your mortgage company or your lending institution, a good thing that came out of the financial bust, the federal government broke up that relationship where the lender and the mortgage company does not have a direct relationship with that appraisal company. They basically put a call out for the zip code for the address and the zip code area, and then appraiser you'll get through the algorithm, here's the closest appraiser. If we create opportunities of having minority-owned appraisers, black-owned appraiser companies, and have appraisers that are out there on the ground, they will be the ones, opposed to a group outside of the area, that will be able to come in and hopefully know what a Belmont looks like versus a Plaza Midwood or a Dilworth or another area. They will be able to know what historic Camp Green, which was formerly Regal Heights, looked like compared to what Bryant Park now is, which is literally across the street but now bleeding into the Camp Green neighborhood, where you had homes that sold for 25, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 now next door to homes that are selling for 480 and up. That is one way that we can start to address this. Another way is with the banking institution, because local government, when talking about affordable housing, the focus is always with multifamily, where you really have dollars put into it. Yes, there are loans and there are grants through the banking industry for down payment assistance. But here's the reality. When I go in and I qualify, I go through all the steps, the training, I may qualify for a $180,000 home. There are no $180,000 homes out there in the market, not a new home.
Right.
Because also I'm getting qualified for new build, not for an older home that I would still have to put work into. Changing that conversation to have more flexibility, and also creating a grant that will help to fit that gap. So if that home is $235,000, how do we close that gap between that 180 and that 235? So there are some conversations that are happening, but the most important conversation is to continue the conversation that we started tonight.
Yes.
So, Mr. Parker, is there anything that you would like to leave with the people?
Well, I think, understanding, the neighborhood like we said earlier, come out of the office and actually get boots on the grounds and get a better understanding. If there are meetings about the community that's happening, try your best to get there. Or if somebody that's gone, to get with them and try to get a understanding of what was talked about and where you can get information concerning that meeting. I think that's quite important, because you had shared something to me, and I know we're getting close to the end, but about the monies that is available, or the grant money that's available for people that have homeowners that have taxes.
Right, because the state of North Carolina has a tax abatement program. Representative Kelly Alexander has been a major proponent and supporter and has pushed through multiple pieces of legislation. Unfortunately, we have a Democratic House and a Republican-led Senate. Well, guess what, people? Get out and vote. Next year, 2020, you're going to be able to change that in the North Carolina General Assembly. Your vote truly does matter.
Yes.
It really comes down to sometimes the difference of 1 to 10 people getting out their house and voting.
Absolutely.
In order to get representatives there that are going to fight for you.
Exactly.
And when we think about all of that, when we think about education, when we think about thinking, I hope that you all have learned something tonight that will help you to have the right conversations with each other, with family, with grandma, Big Mama, Aunt Poochie, Nene, Kiki, TT, Uncle Ray Ray, and Junebug, and everybody else that's in the family. When you're laughing and drinking and eating and everyone's sitting around watching the game in between the commercials, let's have a real conversation about keeping wealth, building wealth. You mentioned an example of, okay, let's say you own 5 homes and you now run into some challenges. Is there a suggestion that you would give someone where if you own 5 homes, a way that you should have those 5 homes listed? Because I don't necessarily think I want all 5 homes listed under my name.
Yeah, well, I think one of the ways that some people do it is through land trusts. They have the property listed in a land trust, and so with doing it like that, they get a level of protection and a level of privacy. So I would, but that's something that needs to be talked about in your churches, and understanding those type of things for building wealth and also preserving wealth. So I think we need to get into some churches.
Yeah. So those of you that are connected, that are members of a congregation, you heard it. Mr. J. Parker. Now, people wanted to contact you. How would they do that?
Best way is to go to Facebook. We're on Facebook at the J. Parker Network, and that's the letter J. Parker Network. And you can instant message me there, or my office hours are.
What are your office hours,
My
sir?
My office hours are 7:30 to 8:30.
PM?
No.
AM.
And we could talk about anything you like to talk about. And if you're interested, just, hit us up on Facebook and we can tell you exactly where to meet us, and you can come out and we can talk and walk.
7:30 to 8:30?
Oh, that's not right.
No, it's not.
That's not right.
Because I have been there. So let's say what that real time is.
The time is 5:30.
5:30 a.m.
7:30.
Yes, in the morning.
Yes, Monday through Friday. And on Saturdays, rain or shine. Yes. And so we bundle up, so it's not, so you're protected against the elements. But on Saturdays, it's 6 to 8 on Saturdays. AM. Still AM. Yeah.
AM. So if you want to put a little sweat equity in, get your heart healthy.
Yes.
And learn. When I tell you I have done it, it triggered tonight's conversation. I have learned so much more on this side to add to the knowledge God allowed me to have as an elected official, especially someone very passionate about housing. So please share this, share tonight's video. You have been tuning in to the Square Media Network. I am your host for Unapologetically Black with LaWanna Mayfield. I want to make sure that you know you got a couple of more weeks to tune into us as we go into 2020. Join the project. Deuce Lux, the conversation, the slant, the situation, frankly speaking, crafted. And for those that want to get on a mic, you can rent space on Channel 13. This is the Square Media Network, and I thank you, Mr. J. Parker, for joining us.
Thank you so kindly. And